I remember my first car as if it were yesterday. It wasn't fast or luxurious. It didn't even have air conditioning that worked consistently. It was a little metal box on wheels with an engine that coughed in the mornings and a radio that only tuned into a classical music station. But it was mine. It was my passport to freedom, the vehicle that took me to college, to poorly paid first jobs, and to awkward dates. It cost almost nothing and used even less. It was, in a word, affordable. Today, that idea, the simple, cheap car, seems like a relic from a distant past, like video rental stores or faith in politics. I'm not exaggerating. In the last decade, the small, economical car has been systematically wiped out from showrooms. In the United States, the number of new models available for less than $20,000 has dropped from more than a dozen to, literally, 2. And one of them already has an expiration date. In Spain, the Dacia Sandero, the eternal king of cheap cars, has seen its entry price increase by almost 40% in 3 years. And in Latin America, iconic models like the Chevrolet Corsa or the Fiat Uno, which provided mobility for entire generations, now only exist in the used car market. The average price of a new car has skyrocketed. But this didn't happen by accident. It's not just inflation or the semiconductor crisis. This was a cold-blooded murder, executed with a precision worthy of a marketing plan. And to understand how we were cornered into this dead end, where the only option seems to be a $30,000 SUV financed over 84 months, we have to break down the 5 master moves, the 5 economic and psychological stabs that killed off the small, affordable car for good. The first stab was the most obvious: profit margin. For decades, especially since the oil crisis of the 70s, manufacturers were forced to produce small and efficient cars. They were a necessity, but in boardrooms they were always seen as a nuisance. A compact car that sells for $15,000 might yield a margin of, say, $1,000 or $2,000. An SUV built on a similar platform with just a bit more metal and plastic can be sold for $35,000, yielding a margin 5 or 6 times greater. The calculation is brutally simple. Selling a small car is like being a restaurant that prides itself on its tap water menu. Sure, it's essential, but it doesn't pay the bills. The real business is in selling you the expensive wine, dessert, and coffee. The automotive industry realized it could take water off the menu and force everyone to order, at the very least, a family-sized soft drink. The goal of modern marketing isn't just to sell you a product, it's to maximize the customer's lifetime value. And a customer who buys a cheap car and keeps it for 10 years is a terrible customer from that perspective. It's much better to trap you in a financing cycle with a more expensive vehicle. But just offering the large combo wasn't enough. They had to convince us that we really needed it, and for that, they used our most primal emotion. The second move was a masterpiece of consumer psychology, turning size into a synonym for safety. During the 90s and 2000s, safety regulations became much stricter. Airbags were added everywhere, side impact bars, crumple zones, stability control. Each new feature added weight and, above all, cost. Manufacturers, instead of complaining, saw a golden opportunity. They started bombarding us with ads showing their huge SUVs protecting smiling families from a hostile world. They created a kind of arms race on the roads. If your neighbor has a 2-ton tank, suddenly your little hatchback feels like a paper bicycle. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more giant vehicles there are on the street, the less safe you feel in a small one, and the more likely it is that your next car will also be huge. It's as if everyone in the schoolyard started wearing medieval armor. At first you laugh, but when your child is the only one in a t-shirt, you start looking up helmet prices on Amazon. In Europe, with its historic and narrow streets, models like the Seat Ibiza or the Renault Clio are still kings. But even there, SUV fever is dangerously spreading through the market, showing the universal power of this tactic. And this obsession with size and safety made us vulnerable to one of the most seductive and dangerous financial tools of the modern world. The third lethal weapon was the normalization of long-term debt. In the past, people would buy an economical car outright or with a loan for 3 or 4 years. The key question was, how much does the car cost? Today, that question is almost irrelevant. The salesperson doesn't even want to talk about the total price. The only question that matters is, how much can you pay per month? This simple question changed everything. It shifted our attention away from the total cost, a big, scary number, to the monthly payment, a small and manageable one. Suddenly, a $40,000 SUV doesn't seem so out of reach if it's only $500 a month. Financing terms stretched from 60 months to 72 and even 84 months. 7 years. You're paying for an asset that depreciates faster than an internet meme. For almost a decade, they're selling you a car as if it were a Netflix subscription. Just a little more per month and you get the premium plan with 4-wheel drive. The problem is, you can't cancel this subscription. And at the end of the term, you've paid thousands of dollars in interest for features you probably never used. Long-term financing made the expensive car seem cheap, and, as a result, killed the main selling point of the small car, its low purchase price. But even with marketing and financing on their side, automakers still faced one obstacle: government regulations designed to protect the environment. Or so we thought. This is where the story becomes ironic. The fourth wound was self-inflicted by the regulators themselves. In the United States, there is a set of rules called CAFE, or Corporate Average Fuel Economy Standards. The idea was simple: force manufacturers to ensure that the average fuel consumption of their entire fleet of vehicles became lower and lower, thus encouraging the production of efficient cars. Sounds good, right? The problem lies in the fine print. The regulations have a loophole the size of a truck. The fuel efficiency requirements are less strict for vehicles with a larger footprint. That is, the area their wheels occupy on the ground. In other words, the bigger your vehicle, the more fuel it is legally allowed to consume. This is like the government telling restaurants, you have to reduce the average calories on your menus. And the restaurants respond, perfect, we'll invent a 5,000-calorie burger, but since it's so big, the law says it only counts as if it had 500. Manufacturers didn't fight against this rule, they exploited it. It gave them the perfect excuse to kill off their small, efficient cars, which they needed to comply with regulations, and replace them with crossovers and SUVs that, thanks to this technicality, met the more relaxed emissions targets while generating massive profits. The law that was supposed to save the planet ended up helping to kill the affordable car. And so, with profitability, psychology, and the law on their side, all that was left was to deliver the final blow, one aimed directly at our perception of value. The final nail in the coffin was the destruction of the entry-level car concept. Historically, the small cheap car was the gateway to a brand. You would buy a basic Ford Fiesta or Honda Civic in your youth, and hopefully, as your career and family grew, you'd stay loyal to the brand and move up to a Focus, an Accord, or an Explorer. It was the foundation of the customer pyramid. But brands became obsessed with their image. A dealership full of $15,000 cars is perceived as cheap. A dealership full of SUVs and trucks costing $35,000 or more is perceived as premium. They decided it was better to be an aspirational brand than an accessible one. They eliminated the base of the pyramid so that only the tip of the iceberg would be visible. Customer acquisition cost is a key metric. It's more profitable to sell more things to an existing customer than to attract a new one. So, why bother attracting young people with little money if they can just wait until they're 35 and can afford the SUV, which is now the entry-level model? They've turned the car ownership ladder into a climbing wall. Before you started on the first rung. Now they tell you the first handhold is 3 meters up and that you might as well buy the professional gear right away. And so here we are today, in a bleak automotive landscape, full of SUV clones that cost a fortune, consume more than they should, and are much bigger than most of us need. The freedom of a simple, affordable first car has been replaced by the burden of a 7-year debt. But I wonder, are we really doomed to this future? What was your first car? Do models like that still exist on the market? I'd love to know if you think this is a deliberate conspiracy by the brands to make us spend more, or if we've simply become a society that values size and looks over practicality and economy. Leave your opinion in the comments. Speaking of how brands manipulate our perception to make us pay more, this strategy isn't exclusive to economy cars. Here I've left you a video about how luxury car brands brainwash you. I assure you that after watching it, you'll never look at an Audi or Mercedes commercial the same way again.